It's Enemy Sidelines presented by Microsoft. Joining me today, my good friend Larra Overton. She's a team reporter for the Indianapolis Colts. Larra, I was just saying you look so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for being on a short week, especially a short week that ended in an overtime loss for the Colts. But give us a sense, what's the mood in the building as these Colts get ready to turn around and face the Texans on Sunday?
Man, tight turnaround indeed. And that's always tough, but you feel like with the result the Colts had on Monday night, it's a good time to have this short week because you need to put that one to bed as quickly as possible. Move right on. You have a huge opportunity this weekend back at home after three straight really tough road games against a division opponent in the Houston Texans. So it's one of those where the Colts need to move on and put that really, that huge defeat, that disappointing loss, a ton of emotion. You probably saw a lot of the guys after at the podium and really just how devastated they were to let that 19-point lead slip away in a hostile environment against an incredible team in the Baltimore Ravens. But there were so many good things when you go back and you look at the way that Carson Wentz played, passing for more than 400 yards, the play of Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman making an incredible catch. There are a lot of components within this Colts team that they feel they're taking the proper steps in getting to where they want to be. But make no mistake, it's tough to recover from a loss like that, from allowing, the Ravens to get back into it as late into the game as you did, especially when this is a defense that really prides itself on being able to match up and to stop a variety of different offenses. But there's just, no match for the former NFL MVP in Lamar Jackson, and just with how special he is at quarterback and what he's able to do for that offense. And there were certainly issues in special teams, issues with this defense in terms of just personnel, lost a number of guys due to injury over the course of that game. So the Colts need to capitalize on having an opportunity back at home to continue to build on the good things that they saw and also correct a lot of things that allowed, that win to slip away from them on Monday night.
Yeah, you mentioned good things that happened, and Carson Wentz was so impressive. You mentioned the 400 yards passing. He was averaging 11 and a half yards per pass. I just remember a few weeks ago seeing him on the injury report with ankles, like as in both ankles, and he continued to play. How has he bounced back from that injury, and has it limited him in any way?
It has been, mind-blowing to see the recovery that he made as quickly as he was able to. When we saw him get knocked out at the end of that game against the Rams at home, and he was on the sideline getting the attention, made every attempt he could to come back into the game, was not able to because of just how quickly, when you think about ankle sprains, those develop so quickly to where that swelling sets in and your mobility is completely restricted. So you look at how limited he was within the offense against the Tennessee Titans when they played in Nashville, looked a little bit better against Miami, and then made immense strides against Baltimore. Still not 100%. I don't think that you can say whatsoever that he's 100% right now with those ankle sprains, but to have made the significant improvement over the course of 3 weeks, because when you think about a high ankle sprain and the severity that can lead to, the kind of range that there is with an ankle sprain with a quarterback who does pride himself on having a degree of mobility. And that's something we certainly did not have within this offense last year with Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers did so many things well, and he was such a productive quarterback within this system. But that was something that was exciting for the Colts when you do bring in a quarterback like Carson Wentz, who does have a different level that you haven't necessarily had to work with, and the options that does create within your offense. And man, week one, we saw it. We saw him making plays really effectively with his feet, keeping plays alive, extending plays the way that he was able to. And so you're starting to see two things. Yes, he is getting healthier. He's also getting more comfortable relying on his receivers and targeting a number of different weapons that he has within this offense. The way he's spreading the ball around has been one of the most intriguing things to watch over the last 3 weeks, because initially It was a lot of, heavy on Zach Pascal early on in those first 2 games, and rightfully so. Zach's an incredibly reliable receiver and is one of those. He's a really crafty route runner with what he's able to do, the positions he's able to put himself in, the separation he's able to get. But now you're seeing more tight ends involved. I'm thinking about 2 different touchdowns to Mo Alley Cox in the game against the Miami Dolphins. Against the Ravens, you saw Mo, you saw Kylan Granson, a lot of Michael Pittman Jr., Paris Campbell starting to get involved. And all this is happening still without T.Y. Hilton, who remains on IR at this point with that neck procedure that he had. So those are the things that I'm really starting to see this offense taking shape and identity of what it wants to be with Carson Wentz. And you certainly needed to see more of those explosive plays. That was something that they wanted to see as they started to integrate Carson into the offense. And that's starting to pay dividends as he is really starting to create more chemistry, more continuity with his receivers. And that's mainly not because of the injury. That really goes back to the very limited time that he had, missing the majority of training camp because of the foot injury that he had. And then, of course, going on the COVID-19 close contact list right prior to that season opener. So this offense is starting to take shape. Now it's time for this defense to start making those similar strides as well and being able to do a lot of what they prided themselves on in the 2020 season, especially being more effective in stopping the run.
Well, Frank Reich has had to deal with so many quarterbacks for the Colts over the past few years that he's been with the team. Last year with Phillip Rivers and this year with Carson Wentz, but he's got that familiarity with Wentz from their time with the Eagles. How much has that really helped, and how much did he really adapt that offense to suit Wentz's positive attributes, if you will?
A different quarterback every season under Frank Reich when you think about it. Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, and Carson Wentz. So you did have Jacoby, of course, for all of 2019, and then he was in the backup role in 2020. And then you went head to head with your former quarterback when you played him in Miami. So it's been very interesting in that he's been scheming this offense for these different quarterbacks, and then also had to scheme against that quarterback when you talked about that week 4 matchup that they had against the Miami Dolphins. And just this week, Carson Wentz, when he passed for over 400 yards, as we noted, became the 4th quarterback in franchise history to eclipse that mark, joining Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, and Johnny Unitas as the only quarterbacks to do that. So you're starting to see a lot of what Frank Reich had kind of promised to Jim Irsay and to Chris Ballard when he pitched the idea of, what do you think about going in and getting Carson Wentz? And obviously Carson was looking for that new chapter, looking to create, a new chapter in his career, starting off in a new place after everything, after everything went the way it did at the final few months of his career with the Philadelphia Eagles. And yes, I think you take elements of what they had success doing in Philadelphia, because not only do you have Frank Reich, you have Mike Groh as well, who was part of that staff in Philly. You have Press Taylor now with the organization as well, who was also one of those who worked closest with Carson during their time with the Eagles. But one of the points of emphasis in bringing Carson in was that he did not have to carry this offense entirely on his own shoulders. And it wasn't, we have to have him play at that MVP level that he was back in 2017 in order for this offense to be successful. No, this is an offense that already had a, solidified offensive line. You have an incredible running game, not only with Jonathan Taylor, but also with Nyheim Hines, Marlon Mack. You have a number of weapons, both at tight end and in the wide receiver room. And then you had this defense kind of anchored by Darius Leonard and DeForest Buckner that you could rely upon as well, that prides itself on being able to be very opportunistic, creating those takeaway opportunities, scoring on defense, doing those different things. So yes, I do think that they adapted the offense somewhat to Carson, but not so much to rely on Carson having to carry this offense, but being able to more so put him in position to be successful, because it's certainly playing to his strengths, but then also his strengths as complement to the guys who he has to work around, and utilizing Jonathan Taylor, who finished the 2020 season as one of the top 3 backs in the NFL and really didn't come on until later in the season when you saw him starting to have those 100-yard plus rushing games that he did. Now he followed up a 100-yard rushing performance against Miami with a 100-yard receiving performance against the Ravens. So you're starting to see certainly this offense taking shape, not just in what they have game planned to do with Carson, but also with Carson being able to use everything else that he has at his disposal.
You mentioned T.Y. Hilton, and Texans fans certainly know a lot about him, but he has been on IR so far. So what can you tell us about his return this year? And also, you mentioned Michael Pittman, how he's really stepped up in his place.
One of the things, I'm going to go to Pittman first because I had a conversation with Frank Reich about Michael Pittman just yesterday, and he brought up the physical presence, the physicality that Pittman plays with at the receiving position is something that they want to heavily build on because he is a big body that you haven't necessarily had within this Colts offense. The Colts have had a ton of success with receivers like T.Y. Hilton, who are more of those speed guys, smaller bodied guys, but who do pride themselves on, the incredible route running, being incredibly fast, tough to cover in a number of different situations, being the guys who are just able to basically capitalize on the mismatch of speed that they have and able to, be very elusive to DBs. So Pittman is a nice complement to that in the fact that he is able to kind of what we saw from Mo Alley Cox, go over the top of a DB's head, almost those you got mossed type of scenarios, and just that battle of will, being able to, even when you have those contested catch scenarios, they're able to will their way into making those catches, making those completions a possibility. And Michael Pittman Jr. had the injury in 2020 that cost him multiple weeks when he was just starting to find a groove with Phillip Rivers. So he came into the season, and this is something I talked to Frank about. Michael Pittman coming into the 2021 season, he was one of the most motivated guys that Frank has ever worked with because of the result that you had Buffalo in the playoffs. Michael went into Frank's office and just had this motivation, and he was just absolutely obsessed with making sure that he picked up where he left off or came into the 2021 season even better in terms of how he went into the off season, how he committed himself to his training, to his workouts, all of those things, the time that he spent with the other receivers and with Carson Wentz, getting up to speed with what they were going to do and what this offense was looking to do. And then T.Y. Hilton, Coach Reich said that he continues to make strides with that rehab. The difficulty when you're talking about a 30-year-old receiver who has a neck procedure is you don't want to rush him back, even though we know that T.Y. has been a quick healer over the course of his career and really has not had a number of major injuries aside from what he did, in the end of that 2019 season, that lower leg injury that he had. So this is something where they're treating it, very cautiously because the severity of dealing with anything, related to that spinal cord area. So you do think that it's optimistic that here toward, you would like to think that before the midway point in the season, it is an option to bring TY off of IR. It's nothing that they expected would be season ending. So you look to, this is a good stretch where the Colts have 4 of the next 5 home game opportunities, that this is a point where, is it a possibility that you start to integrate T.Y. Hilton? Because I don't think it's necessarily going to be a situation where you thrust him in and he's not on a pitch count. You think about getting him in, working his way in, kind of having some scripted plays where you see where his comfort level is, where his timing is with Carson Wentz as well. But make no mistake, the Colts are certainly expecting when T.Y. Hilton gets back, he's going to be a big piece of this offense and going to be someone who you do target in those clutch type of situations, game sealing situations on the line. Because aside from TY, this is a very young receiver room when you kind of look at the rest of the guys around him. And he's a captain. He's one of the most well-respected leaders within that locker room. He's a quiet leader, not a very vocal guy, but certainly your lead by example guy. He's an emotional leader. He is the heart and soul when you talk about these offensive weapons and what he brings. He means an awful lot. And just his presence within the room can do a lot for the rest of these young receivers who you're working with. Michael Pittman, Paris Campbell, still, one of the young guys in that room, all of the different guys who you're working with right now, and turning to Michael Strawn, I'm thinking of, another one as well coming out of this 2021 draft class, who's looking to really mold out and carve out a role within this offense, who kind of need T.Y. Hilton to be that leader to show them the ropes and to help all of these guys progress and develop over the course of the season.
All right, well, let's switch gears and talk about the defense. Matt Eberflus obviously has done a number of good things over his time with the Colts, but in Sunday's game against the Ravens, in the first half, they were able to hold Lamar Jackson to 4 consecutive punts and just a field goal. What changed in the second half, and what does the defense take away from that game on what they could do better the next time?
Man, Lamar started finding Mark Andrews. I think that was where you had the difficulty, was that
on
that
touchdowns
really
and 2-point conversions. Yeah,
exactly. 2 different occasions. That was where things really swung in a different direction. And that was something that both Coach Reich and Coach Eberflus noted, was how much of a elite passer that Lamar Jackson has become. Early on in his career, he was so well noted, of course, for what he does in their run game and the elusiveness that he has. But where he has really developed and become an even greater threat is because of his arm. And now he has both of those things that you have to adjust for. And that was what the Colts simply did not have an answer for. That ended up being the nail in the coffin with, Hollywood Brown having the game clinching, game winning touchdown. So you do have a depleted group in that secondary. You saw Xavier Rhodes leave the game. He's now in concussion protocol. Anderson Dejo also now in concussion protocol. You did not have Rock Ya-Sin in that game. He missed a second straight game as well. So you look at the personnel, and that was certainly, a detriment late to the Colts. It's, frighteningly similar to what the Colts saw in 2020 when they had the Ravens at home, and you started the second half, you had a lead, you had done a good job of containing that offense early on, and they made the necessary adjustments that were able to figure out ways, to mount a comeback. And that's exactly what they did yet again. And this defense has struggled to close out games. And that's something that guys like Darius Leonard have been very honest about. They've got to come out and play 4 complete quarters. And we've yet to be able to see them do just that. Early on, they were effective with the pass rush. You were able to get to Lamar Jackson on a couple of different occasions with guys, like Taekwon Lewis and Al-Qadim Muhammad up there. Kamoko Toure, also one of your guys. You did not have Kwity Paye, your first round pick. Again, a second straight game missed for him. He got injured in that game against the Tennessee Titans. He has a hamstring issue that he's dealing with. So a lot of the personnel situations you turn to, but yeah, I think just you really just look to the Ravens were able to scheme for the weaknesses that you had within that defense, within that secondary, and they were able to start really using. I mean, Mark Andrews is a tough guy to cover no matter what, because of just the absolute presence that he brings. So the Colts just did not have an answer when those two started finding that connection. And it's really difficult when that offense for the Ravens starts rolling. It's really tough for anyone in the NFL to contain them, as you've seen, over the course of this season. That's why they're sitting right now, at 4-1 at this point in the year. So it's it was a very tough test. It's a tough loss for this defense to swallow, seeing the position they were in and the holes that the Ravens were able to find within their defense. And now you're looking to, this is a big point where the Colts are going to have to defensively figure out a way to play complementary football, in all 4 quarters, and come out, in quarters 3 and 4 with the same type of effort you had quarters 1 and 2.
All right. Well, you mentioned injuries, and I think one interesting story on a short week is the situation of the kicker, Rodrigo Blankenship, who had a tough game on Monday night, but then saw some reports that he may have to go an MRI and may may have to miss time, or does he not? What do the Colts plan to do with their kicker situation heading into Sunday on such a short week?
It is a great question. Rodrigo noted that he had a stabbing pain that began in warmups on Monday night in his right hip. So as he was bringing that leg back, he felt that issue kind of begin to arise. And that's something that he was battling through that led to an MRI on Tuesday. We don't yet know the result of that MRI. Coach Reich spoke on Tuesday afternoon. The medical meeting is after his availability. He will speak again this afternoon. So we expect to have some answers. One thing that you note, should this be a situation in which you are going to lose Rodrigo Blankenship for a number of games, you had Eddie Pinheiro in training camp who kicked very well in some of those preseason games before he was ultimately released. And you did rely on bringing, Rodrigo back for a second straight season. You think about too, I mean, Rodrigo in a rookie year kicked a game-winning field goal in overtime to beat the Green Bay Packers at Lucas Oil Stadium. This is a guy who's been incredibly clutch. This is uncharacteristic for him to have the type of game that he did, and that's why you look to this is certainly a concerning injury issue for your second-year kicker. So I believe that one of the options you could explore is if Rodrigo's going to miss time, do you bring Eddie back? He's a guy who you're familiar with already from the few weeks that you had with him, back in July and August. He's, was very well respected, very well liked around the building. So that's an option. Also, I mean, Rigoberto Sanchez, your punter, he kicked and punted when he was in college. So is that an option that you explore? He does kick in some scenarios. So it's going to be interesting. You have a few different things that you could look to. Also, you hope above all that this is a minor issue for Rodrigo, that perhaps he's able to, you're able to do some maintenance on that hip, and maybe it's not quite as severe that's going to cost him any amount of time, because he truly is. I mean, he is one of the most popular, well-liked guys within this fan base. He has created a massive following with his respect the specs and, hot rod and all the different things. So you certainly hope that this is not something that is detrimental to him, that costs him a significant amount of time. So certainly hoping that this is an issue that they're able to treat, get him back on the field as quickly as possible. A couple of different things that you're looking to: is Eddie Pinheiro an option, or is Rigo Sanchez an option for you?
Lots to look for this week on a short week for the Colts, and as the Texans get their road tour started up at Indianapolis. Larra Overton, team reporter for the Indianapolis Colts. Larra, always a pleasure chatting and catching up with you, and we'll do it again later on this season.
Look forward to it. Can't wait to get down there, see you guys in Houston, back to being on the road, at least in some situations. So looking forward to that as well, because we know anytime you talk about division matchups, especially Colts Texans, it's always an interesting one, always a great battle between those two.
It's always hard fought. It seems like it's been a nail biter the last few years. So appreciate it, Larra. Thanks for the time, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks for watching, and go Texans. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell for new content.